My name is Holly. I'm 38 years old. And I was folding my husband's shirts when I smelled a perfume that wasn't mine. He looked at me, smirked, and said, "You're imagining things." I stayed silent until the night his mistress called me. "Mom." That's when I stopped being the quiet wife and started planning my revenge. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood where every house looks the same. Freshly painted fences, trimmed lawns, and mailboxes that all gleam under the afternoon sun. People here smile when they wave, but those smiles rarely reach their eyes. Just like mine stopped reaching Nathan years ago. Nathan and I had been married for 17 years. We had a daughter, Maya, who was 16 and full of her own teenage world. Friends, phone calls, and whispered secrets that made me feel both proud and old. Nathan was 42, successful, confident, and always in control. The kind of man who looked good in a crisp shirt, the kind I was folding that afternoon. Our house was quiet except for the hum of the washing machine. I remember standing in our laundry room, the sunlight cutting across the counter, landing on a pile of neatly pressed shirts that smelled faintly of starch and cologne. But this time, the scent was wrong. There was something floral, faint, and expensive woven into the fabric, a perfume that didn't belong to me. I lifted the shirt to my nose and inhaled again, a chill crawling down my spine. I hadn't worn perfume in weeks. Nathan once said he preferred me natural. So whose scent was this? When I asked him later, my voice was small, too careful. "Nathan, did you change your cologne?" He looked up from his phone, not even pretending to think. "What? No, why?" "I just noticed something different on your shirts, like a perfume maybe." He smirked. That smirk, the one that didn't reach his eyes, the one that told me I'd become a punchline in a conversation I wasn't even aware of. "You're being paranoid, Holly," he said lightly, chuckling as if I'd just told a joke. And just like that, I swallowed my words, along with the sting that came with them. I told myself not to overreact, that maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was the dry cleaner or a coworker brushing past him. But deep down, I knew. A woman knows. That night, Nathan fell asleep easily, his breathing slow and steady beside me. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the patterns of light from the street lamp outside, listening to the faint ticking of the clock on the nightstand. I couldn't stop replaying that smirk in my mind, the curve of his lips, the quiet dismissal, the way he made me feel small without even raising his voice. Once upon a time, those lips kissed me like I was air and water. Now they barely brushed my cheek before he left for work. It hadn't always been this way. Nathan used to bring me coffee in bed on Sundays, used to sneak up behind me while I cooked and wrap his arms around my waist. He'd whisper about our future, about the trips we'd take when the business was stable, when Maya was older. But those whispers faded, replaced by silence, replaced by excuses about deadlines and client dinners. Somewhere between his promotions and my sacrifices, we stopped being partners and became roommates who shared bills and history. I had given up my design career to raise Maya and support Nathan's ambitions. He used to thank me for it, used to say he couldn't have done it without me. Lately, he said nothing at all. I turned on my side, looking at him as he slept, his hand resting over the pillow, his wedding ring glinting under the lamplight. I wondered if that ring meant anything to him anymore. I wondered if he even noticed me lying beside him. Sleep didn't come easily that night. My thoughts drifted through every moment that had led us here. The dinners gone cold, the unreturned touches, the times I'd said, "Are you okay?" And he'd replied, "Just tired." The next morning, I moved like a ghost through our routine. Coffee, toast, his briefcase, my smile, everything practiced, everything false. When he left, I went back to the laundry room, determined to push away the unease, to convince myself that I was imagining things. But as I reached for one of his white dress shirts, I saw it, a faint pink smudge on the cuff. Lipstick. Not mine. My chest tightened. I held it under the light, my fingers trembling. It was subtle, almost invisible, but there. I walked to the sink, grabbed the stain remover, and began scrubbing. The water turned cloudy, the stain slowly fading away. I stared at the shirt as if it held all the answers I didn't want. "Who are you, really?" I whispered, not sure if I was asking him or myself. I thought about calling him right then, demanding the truth. But what would he say? What could he say that would undo that smirk, that scent, that lipstick? So I folded the shirt carefully, placed it on top of the others, and wiped my hands on a towel. My reflection in the laundry room window looked unfamiliar. Tired eyes, hollow cheeks, a woman who'd spent too many years waiting to be loved the same way she gave love. The house felt too quiet. Even the refrigerator's hum sounded like judgment. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old photos of us, smiling on vacations, laughing at birthday parties, holding Maya when she was little. We looked like a family that had everything together, but photos can lie. My phone buzzed suddenly, vibrating against the counter. The sound made me jump, an unknown number. For a moment I hesitated, then I opened it. The message read, "He said you wouldn't mind." My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. The room seemed to tilt, the air thickening around me. My fingers went numb, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. Who was he? What was I not supposed to mind? The message sat there, cold and taunting, as if daring me to respond. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, in my hands, in the silence that followed. My entire world had just shifted, and I didn't even know it yet. Holly's phone vibrates again, flashing the same unknown number, this time with an image loading slowly beneath the words, "He said you wouldn't mind." At first, I thought it was a wrong number. Then she sent me a photo of my husband's watch on her nightstand. The message glowed on my screen like an open wound. "He said you wouldn't mind." For a full minute, I didn't move. I just stared at it, my heart thudding so loud it drowned out every other sound in the room. I told myself it had to be a mistake, some cruel spam, a random text meant for someone else. But before I could decide what to do, another notification appeared. This one wasn't just words. It was a photo. A bedroom I didn't recognize. A nightstand with a lamp shaped like a golden feather. And right beside it, Nathan's watch. The silver one I'd given him for our 10th anniversary. The one engraved with Forever H. My breath hitched. My fingers tingled. I zoomed in, hoping my eyes were lying. But there it was, clear as daylight. My handwriting etched on the back of that watch. There was no mistaking it. I didn't reply. My hands were trembling too much. Instead, I took a screenshot, then another, as if preserving evidence in some silent trial. My mind spun. Who would send that? Who was this person? I put the phone down and stared at the wall for a long time. The washing machine beeped in the background, its cheerful chime mocking the heaviness in my chest. By the time Nathan came home that night, I had almost convinced myself not to say anything. Almost. He walked in humming softly, his tie loosened, looking every bit the man who'd had a productive day at work. He leaned over and kissed my cheek casually. "Smells good in here," he said, sniffing the air. "Dinner ready?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just about." He scrolled through his phone as we ate, grinning at something he read. Every time the screen lit up, my stomach knotted. "Something funny?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Just a meme from a coworker," he said easily, never looking up. That's when I realized how practiced he'd become at lying. It wasn't in the words, it was in the ease, the total absence of guilt. After dinner, I stood at the sink, washing dishes while Nathan watched TV in the other room. The laughter from the sitcom bled through the walls, hollow and distant. I stared down at the soap bubbles and wondered how long I'd been living with a stranger. The next morning, over breakfast, he was unusually cheerful, whistling while scrolling his phone again. "You're in a good mood," I said, sipping my coffee. He smirked. "It's Friday." I studied his face, that same smirk again, the same one that had haunted me since yesterday. I wondered if he smirked like that for her too. When he left for work, I sat at the table long after the door closed, the silence pressing against me. Then, without overthinking it, I called my best friend, Celine. Celine had been my anchor since college, blunt, kind, and fiercely protective. When I told her about the message and the photo, she didn't gasp or try to soften it. She just said, "Don't confront him yet." "Why not?" I asked, pacing the kitchen. "Because if he's lying now, he'll only cover his tracks better once he knows you're onto him. You need proof, Holly. Solid proof." Her words hit me like a splash of cold water. She was right. If Nathan could look me in the eye and smirk while lying, then he could lie through any confrontation. So I decided to wait, to watch. Over the next few days, I became hyper-aware of everything he did. The way he guarded his phone, the sudden evening meetings, the extra effort he put into looking sharp for business dinners. While he was in the shower, I started quietly collecting evidence, receipts from his jacket pockets, credit card statements, gas charges from towns he didn't mention visiting. I began noting every inconsistency in a small notebook I kept tucked inside my purse. It felt wrong, sneaky even, but I had no choice. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. One evening, Nathan came home, smelling faintly of the same unfamiliar perfume I'd noticed on his shirts. It made my stomach twist. I told him I had a headache and went to bed early, except I didn't sleep. I waited. Sure enough, at 9:47 p.m., he got up quietly, changed his shirt, and told me he was heading out for a late client meeting. On a Friday night, I murmured, pretending to be half asleep. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before replying, "Yeah, the client's flying out tomorrow. Can't reschedule." I kept my breathing even until I heard the front door close and his car start. Then I got up, heart pounding, grabbed my keys, and followed. The streets were quiet, the kind of stillness that amplifies every sound. His taillights glowed red ahead of me, leading me down familiar roads, and then into a part of town I didn't recognize. A small restaurant, half hidden behind oak trees, sat at the end of a narrow street. Dim lights glowed through the windows, soft music drifting out each time someone entered. I parked a few spaces away and watched him get out of his car. He checked his reflection in the window, straightened his shirt, and smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in years. Then I saw her. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, with long blonde hair and a floral dress. She waved at him shyly before stepping into his arms. He hugged her like it was the most natural thing in the world. My stomach sank. They went inside together, laughing, oblivious to the storm brewing in the parking lot. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, every nerve in my body screaming. I wanted to burst in, to scream, to expose him, right there. But Celine's words echoed in my mind. Don't confront him yet. So I stayed, watching, hurting, breaking. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe longer. My tears blurred the streetlights into halos of gold and red. Finally, I reached for my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I scrolled to the unknown number that had sent me the photo. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't know what I wanted to say. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. Before I could decide, the phone buzzed. It was the same number. My throat went dry as I swiped to answer. Hello? There was a pause, then a soft, feminine giggle. Light, careless, intimate. Hello? I said again, my voice barely a whisper. The line went dead. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. That giggle echoed in my head, bright and cruel, and I suddenly understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. Someone wanted me to know. As I sat trembling in my car, staring at the restaurant where my husband laughed with another woman, my phone lit up again. The same number, the same photo. This time with a caption, "He's smiling for me now." That giggle haunted me more than any confession could. That giggle haunted me more than any confession could. It wasn't loud or mocking. It was soft, playful, intimate. The kind of sound that belonged in pillow talk, not in my nightmares. I kept replaying it in my mind all night, hearing faintly under it a whisper that twisted my stomach into knots. She'll never know. But I did know, and that was the problem. By morning, I looked like a ghost of myself. My reflection in the bathroom mirror was pale, eyes shadowed, lips pressed into a thin line. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the ache sitting heavy in my chest. Downstairs, Nathan was already at the kitchen table, reading the news on his tablet, coffee steaming beside him. He didn't even glance up when I entered. "Morning," he muttered. "Morning," I echoed, forcing my voice not to shake. He acted distant, distracted, his fingers tapping on the screen as if he were composing a message. When I spoke, he answered without really listening. I watched him closely, trying to spot a flicker of guilt, a trace of recognition. But there was nothing. Just that practiced calm of a man who thought his lies were safe. I wanted to ask him straight out, "Who is she?" But instead, I smiled faintly and buttered my toast. pretending to be the same forgiving wife I'd always been. Because Celine was right. I needed proof, not rage. After he left for work, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the mug he'd left behind. Lipstick on his shirt, perfume on his clothes, a giggle on my phone, and now silence sitting across from me like a ghost. I opened my laptop. If he wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. It took only minutes to discover her. I started with the clues I had, the restaurant name from the credit card statement, the date he said he'd had a client dinner. Scrolling through the restaurant's tagged photos, I found her easily, a girl with golden hair and flawless skin, posing beside a plate of pasta under warm, romantic lighting. Her caption read, "Friday Night Perfection." Her name was Amber Lewis, and her smile was the kind that made strangers stop scrolling. She looked young, maybe 25. My stomach turned as I clicked her profile. There she was, sprawled across beach photos, selfies with fancy cocktails, cozy dinners, and then I saw one that made my blood run cold. Amber at Nathan's favorite steakhouse, holding up a glass of wine. Behind her, reflected faintly in the restaurant's mirror wall, was Nathan. I zoomed in until my eyes blurred. The reflection was small, but it was him. His posture, his shirt, his watch, my gift. A cold calm washed over me. Instead of crying, I started to work. I printed screenshots, timestamps, captions. I wrote notes on each. Dates, places, cross-checks with Nathan's meetings. Page after page, I built a record of deceit. It wasn't about catching him anymore. It was about understanding just how long I'd been living a lie. By noon, the table was covered in papers, and my laptop hummed under the weight of it all. I felt strangely composed, detached, like a detective documenting someone else's heartbreak. That's when I grabbed an empty notebook from the drawer, a blue leather one I'd bought years ago, but never used. I wrote on the first page in neat, steady handwriting, a record of truth. It wasn't just evidence anymore, it was therapy. Every note I wrote stripped a layer of illusion away. When Maya came home from school that afternoon, I hid everything before she walked in. She dropped her backpack and hugged me, her teenage perfume filling the room. "Hey, Mom," she said brightly, but then frowned. "You look tired. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just didn't sleep well." She studied me for a moment, as if trying to read between the lines, but finally shrugged and went upstairs. I watched her go, feeling both relief and guilt. She didn't deserve to be dragged into this. I wouldn't let Nathan's betrayal shatter her sense of family. That evening, Celine came over with a bottle of red wine. She took one look at me and said, "You've been digging, haven't you?" I nodded. "Her name's Amber." Celine raised an eyebrow. "Of course it is. Sounds like a perfume." Despite myself, I almost laughed, but the sound came out hollow. "I've got everything I need," I told her. "Dates, photos, proof." "Good," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Now don't do anything stupid. You're not going to scream or throw things. You're going to stay calm, because that's what scares men like Nathan the most." I looked at her. "You think he'll care?" "Oh, honey," she said softly. "He'll care when you stop reacting. That's when he'll realize you're not his shadow anymore." Her words stuck with me, long after she left. That night, while Nathan scrolled through his phone on the couch, I sat beside him reading a novel I wasn't actually reading. Every so often I'd glance at him, the curve of his mouth, the way he smiled at the screen, the quiet hum in his throat. He looked content, comfortable, safe in the lie he built. And I smiled too, because I finally knew I wasn't the one trapped anymore. He was. Days passed, but the unease didn't fade. If anything, it grew sharper. My mind buzzed with questions I couldn't ask aloud. Then one evening, while washing dishes, my phone vibrated again. An unknown number, the same one. I wiped my hands and unlocked it, expecting another photo. Instead, it was a message. "You'd make a great mother-in-law." My pulse stuttered. I stared at the words, my stomach twisting into a knot. Was this mockery? Was she taunting me now? I read it again. Mother-in-law. The word burned. I tried to steady my breathing. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, unsure whether to ignore it or respond. My better judgment screamed at me to delete the message and move on. But curiosity and anger had their own voices. Finally, I typed back, my hands trembling slightly. "Who are you?" For a moment, nothing happened. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the ticking clock. Then, in less than 5 seconds, the reply appeared. I'm Amber, Nathan's girlfriend. The words blurred as I read them. Girlfriend. Not coworker, not friend, not mistake. Girlfriend. The room tilted, my breath catching in my throat. Somewhere in the distance, the dishwasher beeped, signaling the end of its cycle. A sharp, ordinary sound that somehow made the moment feel even more surreal. I stared at my phone until my reflection appeared in the dark screen, the face of a woman who'd just been told her marriage was over by a stranger. My hand trembled so violently that the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. On the screen, a new message appeared. He said you'd understand. Hook. I stared at the word girlfriend until the letters blurred. But what broke me was what came next. She called me Mom. I stared at the word girlfriend until the letters blurred, the glow of the screen washing everything around me in cold light. The word felt sharp, like a blade pressed gently against my chest. Not deep enough to kill, just enough to remind me I could still bleed. But what broke me wasn't the word itself. It was what came next. A second message appeared almost instantly. You're so nice. Nathan says you're like a mom to him. My hands went cold. I could almost hear her voice. Young, teasing, self-satisfied. She wasn't apologizing. She was mocking me, playing with her power like a child who'd found matches. My chest tightened, a burning humiliation rising from somewhere deep, dark, and wordless. I wanted to scream, to call her, to tell her she had no idea what she was doing. But as the anger pulsed through me, something else pushed back. Reason. Clarity. I closed the message and placed the phone face down on the table. She wanted a reaction. I wouldn't give her one. I sat there for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick on the wall. For the first time since all this began, I felt something shift inside me. Not grief, not rage, but focus. A quiet, deliberate stillness that whispered, no more crying, no more waiting. Plan. The next morning, after Maya left for school and Nathan for work, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, the lawyer Celine had recommended weeks ago, just in case. At the time, I'd brushed it off, believing I'd never need her. Her name was Julia, and her voice was calm, professional, reassuring. We met in her office that afternoon, the kind of minimalist space that smelled faintly of coffee and clean paper. She listened quietly as I told her everything, the texts, the photos, the watch, the perfume. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, Holly, you need to protect yourself. Emotionally, yes, but also financially. If he's living a double life, you need to know where the money is going. The word money hit me like a slap. I hadn't even thought about it. Julia explained what documents I should gather. Bank statements, tax returns, asset lists. She told me not to confront him yet, not until I was sure. By the time I left her office, I had a manila folder of information and a strange calmness I hadn't felt in weeks. When I got home, I went straight to the filing cabinet in Nathan's home office. He'd always been protective of his paperwork, but I knew where the spare key was hidden, taped under his desk drawer. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. In a folder labeled Investments, I found account statements from a bank I didn't recognize. The balances were large, very large, and the account was in his name only. No mention of mine. I felt my stomach drop. He had been moving money quietly, bit by bit, building a separate life, not just emotionally, but financially. I sat back in his chair, staring at the evidence of his betrayal in black ink. Anger flared again, hot and sharp, but it didn't make me cry this time. It made me plan. I copied everything, every statement, every transfer record, and placed the copies in my own folder labeled Truth. When Maya came home from school that day, she dropped her backpack on the couch and said, Mom, you look different. I smiled gently. Different good or different bad? She tilted her head. You look like you know something. That made me laugh, genuinely for the first time in weeks. Maybe I do, I said softly. She grinned, satisfied with the mystery, and disappeared into her room, her music echoing faintly down the hallway. That night, Nathan came home late again. I heard the garage door open, then the jingle of his keys. I stayed at the kitchen counter, pretending to read. He walked in smelling of that same perfume, sweet and floral, the scent that had branded itself into my memory. He smiled, casual as ever. "Hey, sorry, late meeting." I looked up, met his eyes, and said evenly, "I figured." He blinked, caught off guard by my calmness. Then he smirked, that same damned smirk from weeks ago, and walked past me without another word. I didn't respond. I didn't even flinch. My silence said everything. He poured himself a drink, turned on the TV, and relaxed like a man who thought he was untouchable. I watched him from the reflection in the window. The man I once loved, the man who no longer existed. When he finally went upstairs, I sat alone in the dim kitchen light. My hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from the adrenaline of control returning to me. For 17 years, I'd been the quiet wife, patient, forgiving, predictable. He thought that silence meant weakness. But now, my silence was my weapon. I poured myself a glass of water, took a slow sip, and looked at my phone lying on the counter. A single notification blinked. Another message. For a moment, I hesitated before opening it. "We're going on a weekend trip. Should I bring him one of your shirts for luck?" The room seemed to shrink around me. I could almost hear her laughing as she typed it, so sure of her place in his world, so oblivious to the storm she was walking into. I stared at the message until my eyes burned. Then I turned off the phone, set it face down again, and whispered to the empty kitchen, "Go ahead, Amber. Borrow whatever you like. Just remember, I always get things back." Holly's reflection in the dark window catches her eye. She's no longer the same woman staring back. The phone buzzes again on the counter, flashing one more message. "Wish me luck, Mom." I didn't stop them. I packed his bag myself and slipped in something he'd never expect. I didn't stop them. I packed his bag myself and slipped in something he'd never expect. Nathan told me about the conference on a Thursday night. He stood in the doorway, adjusting his tie, pretending to check the time like a man too busy for questions. "It's just 2 nights," he said casually. "Company retreat. Networking thing." I looked up from the dinner table and nodded. "That sounds nice. You could use a break." He blinked, surprised. Maybe he expected suspicion or bitterness, but instead I smiled and asked if he needed help packing. He hesitated for only a second before shrugging. "Sure, if you want." That night, I laid out his shirts, his travel-sized toiletries, and his cologne, the one he thought I didn't know she'd chosen for him. I folded everything with meticulous care, my movements calm, precise. He'd never know that every crease, every careful placement of fabric was part of something deliberate. When he went upstairs to shower, I reached into the drawer where I kept my old camera gear. Years ago, before motherhood swallowed my hobbies, I dabbled in photography. The small black recorder fit easily into my palm, no bigger than a thumb drive, with hours of battery life. I slipped it into the inner pocket of his duffel bag, right next to his shaving kit. He'd take it everywhere without knowing. As he came back down the stairs, fresh and smiling, I zipped the bag shut and handed it to him. "You're all set," I said softly. "Thanks," he said, his voice light, easy. He leaned in and brushed a kiss against my cheek, the kind of perfunctory gesture you give someone safe, someone forgotten. "Take care," I whispered back, and meant every word. He smiled, oblivious to the trap in his hand. When the door closed behind him, the quiet that followed felt heavier than ever before. But instead of crying, I took a deep breath and sat at the kitchen counter with my folder of evidence. It was time to finish what I'd started. For 2 days, I barely left the house. While Nathan and Amber played pretend at love somewhere by the ocean or a rented hotel suite, I played detective. I combed through our shared email account, his business correspondence, and online banking. I followed digital trails like breadcrumbs. And then I found it, the pattern that made my blood run cold. Transfers from his business account to that same hidden personal one. Small, irregular amounts that didn't match any invoices. Julia's voice echoed in my head. If he's lying emotionally, he's probably lying financially. The amounts weren't massive, not yet, but they were enough to raise flags. Enough to suggest that Nathan had been siphoning company money to fund his new life. My life. The phone bills showed calls to Amber's number almost daily, some lasting hours. I felt a sting of humiliation each time I saw her name, but beneath that, something stronger pulsed. Clarity. I saved every document, every screenshot, every timestamp. The truth was stacking up neatly in my favor. By Saturday night, exhaustion crept into my bones. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of knowing too much. When the house grew too quiet, I thought about the recorder. It was a simple device, nothing fancy, but its silence suddenly felt heavy with secrets. I waited until Sunday evening before checking it. When the recording synced to my laptop, I sat frozen, staring at the audio waveforms scrolling across the screen. Then I pressed play. At first there was nothing but muffled sounds. Car doors, laughter, the rustle of fabric. Then came voices. Nathan's, Amber's. I couldn't breathe. His voice, warm and low, saying words I hadn't heard in years. Compliments. Teasing. Little inside jokes that used to belong to us. I listened to her laughter. That same laugh that had haunted me through the phone. Every giggle felt like a nail being driven into the coffin of the life I thought we had. But I didn't stop listening. Because mixed in with the sweetness were other things. Fragments of conversation that made my pulse quicken. Mentions of transfers, of keeping things quiet, of no one finding out at work. I leaned closer, replaying it over and over. There it was. Confirmation. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was defrauding his own company. My heartbreak turned into something sharp and luminous. I'd been humiliated, betrayed, lied to. But now I had everything. Not just emotional proof, but factual proof. The next day, I called Celine. She arrived with her usual whirlwind of energy, carrying takeout and concern in equal measure. I told her everything. About the bank transfers, the audio, the proof. She listened, silent for once, her eyes widening with each revelation. When I finished, she exhaled slowly and said, "Holly, you're sitting on a grenade. Be careful how you throw it." I smiled faintly. "I don't want to destroy him, Celine. I just want the truth out. No more lies." She nodded. "Then let's do this smart. Truth before destruction." We spent the next few hours organizing everything. I printed transcripts of the recording, highlighted key lines, and arranged the financial records in order. It wasn't just a folder anymore. It was a weapon. By the time I went to bed that night, exhaustion hit me like a wave. But it was a peaceful kind of tired, the kind that comes from taking control after too long in the dark. When I woke up the next morning, the house felt different, lighter. I brewed coffee, set out breakfast for Maya, and waited. At 9:17 a.m., Nathan's car pulled into the driveway. He walked through the door wearing the same smile he always wore after a conference. His skin looked tanned, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bright with the glow of guiltless fun. "Hey," he said, setting his bag down. "Miss me?" I looked up from my coffee cup, meeting his eyes calmly. For the first time, he seemed unsure. Maybe because I wasn't crying or asking or pretending. I was just there, still, silent. I gestured toward his bag. "Did you have a good trip?" "Yeah," he said, smiling as he loosened his collar. "Work stuff, you know. Long meetings, boring dinners." I nodded slowly, letting the quiet stretch between us. Then I stood up, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and turned to face him fully. "How was your weekend?" I asked evenly. "With Amber?" The air left the room. He froze, color draining from his face, his smile collapsing in an instant. And for the first time since it all began, I watched him break while I stood tall. His mouth opened, then closed again, like a man gasping for air. Holly crossed her arms and said softly, "Don't bother lying, Nathan. I heard everything." His face drained of color. For the first time, I saw fear instead of arrogance. His face drained of color. For the first time, I saw fear instead of arrogance. Nathan's jaw twitched as though he was trying to form words, but his tongue had forgotten how to move. What did you just say?" he stammered, eyes darting to the floor, then back to me. "How was your weekend with Amber?" I repeated, my voice calm, almost conversational. He blinked rapidly, shaking his head. "Holly, I don't know what you're talking about." I tilted my head slightly. Don't do that. Don't insult me by pretending. He tried to laugh, a small hollow sound that cracked before it reached his lips. You're being ridiculous. You know how rumors start. I reached into the drawer beside me, took out a small USB stick, and placed it gently on the table between us. You left this in your bag. His eyes widened. What is that? Why don't you listen and find out? I said quietly. He didn't move. His throat worked as he swallowed hard, the color draining further from his cheeks. You went through my things? I gave a faint smile. No, Nathan. I went through our things. You just forgot they still belong to both of us. He stared at the USB, then at me, trying to gauge how much I knew. I didn't make him wait. I opened my laptop, plugged it in, and hit play. His voice filled the room instantly, warm, familiar, and utterly foreign all at once. You know, I haven't felt this alive in years. The recording played. Then Amber's laugh followed, that soft, girlish tone that had once made me flinch in the dark. Nathan's lips parted as if to speak, but the words caught in his throat. I paused the audio. The silence that followed was unbearable. I turned to him. Do you want to tell me again how I'm imagining things? He sank into the chair opposite me, rubbing his temples. His smirk, the one I'd hated, the one that used to make me feel small, was gone. I don't know what you want me to say, he muttered. The truth, I said simply. For once. He leaned back, sighing heavily, eyes glassy with panic. Okay, fine. Yes, I've been seeing someone, but it's not what you think. I laughed softly. Oh, it's exactly what I think. It's not like that, he insisted. He exhaled sharply, hands trembling. I've been feeling alone, unseen. You've been so focused on Maya, on the house, on everything else. I don't even know when we stopped. Don't, I interrupted, my tone cutting but controlled. Don't you dare make me your excuse. You chose this, Nathan. He looked at me helplessly, like a man caught in a net of his own making. I made a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. I can fix it. I folded my arms, feeling the strength of my own stillness. No, Nathan, you can't fix it. You can only face it. His voice rose, desperation leaking through the cracks of his composure. Holly, please, I'll end it. I'll tell her it's over right now. I swear. I shook my head. You already ended something. Our marriage. That silenced him. The weight of those words hung between us like smoke, heavy and suffocating. He reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled it back. His touch felt foreign now, a stranger's hand wearing my husband's skin. I never meant to hurt you, he whispered. I looked him dead in the eye. You didn't just hurt me, Nathan. You erased me, and you thought I wouldn't notice. He pressed his palms together, lowering his head as though praying. Please don't do this. We can work through it. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I almost pitied him then. Almost. But pity doesn't survive betrayal. There's nothing to work through, I said quietly. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. He looked up, confusion flickering in his eyes. What are you saying? I'm filing for separation, I replied, each word deliberate and calm. I've already spoken to a lawyer. He flinched as though struck. A lawyer? Yes. He pushed back from the table, pacing, running a hand through his hair. You can't just, after all we've built, after all this time. I stood up slowly. You built lies, Nathan. I just kept the roof from caving in. He stopped pacing and stared at me, his mouth opening to argue, but I was done listening. I'm not yelling, I said softly. I'm not crying. You've taken enough of my energy. You don't get my rage too. His shoulders sagged, his expression crumbling into something small. Regret, maybe, or just the shock of losing control. Holly, he whispered, voice breaking. Please don't give up on me. I took a step back. I gave up everything for you. That was my mistake. This, I gestured around us, is my correction. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the kitchen clock, marking the end of something we'd both pretended still existed. Finally, I turned away. You can sleep in the guest room tonight. He didn't argue. That night, I lay in Maya's room while she slept soundly beside me, unaware of the storm outside her door. The soft rhythm of her breathing grounded me, For years, I'd been afraid of losing the life I built, but as I listened to her, I realized I hadn't lost anything worth keeping. The woman who'd once depended on Nathan no longer existed. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the tears slip silently down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of heartbreak this time. They were release. For the first time in years, I felt free. Exhausted, trembling, but free. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the floor as I made coffee. The house was still, the kind of quiet that follows explosions. I stood by the window, cup in hand, breathing deeply. That's when I saw it. A flash of color outside the door. A figure walking up the driveway. I frowned, setting down my cup. As she came closer, my stomach twisted. It was her. Amber. She was holding a bouquet of flowers, roses, pale pink and white. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just watched her through the glass, her bright smile and careless confidence radiating like sunlight. I had imagined meeting her 100 times, but never like this. Amber lifted her hand to knock, her flowers trembling slightly. I whispered to myself, "So it begins," and opened the door before she could. She smiled as if we were old friends, completely unaware she was standing in the ruins she helped create. She smiled as if we were old friends, completely unaware she was standing in the ruins she helped create. Amber looked younger up close, not just in years, but in how she carried herself. Nervous, fidgeting, clutching a bouquet of roses that looked far too delicate for this house, for this moment. "Hi," she said softly, her voice almost uncertain. "You must be Holly." I nodded, my hand resting lightly on the doorframe. "I am." She shifted awkwardly, her eyes flicking to the flowers. I wanted to say sorry. I didn't know he was married. For a second, I almost laughed. Not cruelly, just at the absurdity of it. Of her standing there, apologizing with trembling hands and mascara smudged under her eyes, as if that could undo the damage, but instead of slamming the door, I stepped aside. "Come in." Her eyes widened, startled. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said simply. "If you're going to apologize, you should at least be comfortable doing it." She hesitated, then walked in, her perfume trailing faintly behind her. That same scent that had haunted my nights and my laundry. It no longer made my stomach twist. It was just a smell. Amber's eyes darted around the living room. The family photos, the soft beige furniture, the little signs of a life she'd unknowingly invaded. "This is a beautiful house," she said, her voice small. "Thank you," I replied, motioning toward the couch. "Would you like some tea?" Her shoulders relaxed slightly, as if the offer disarmed her. "Sure, thank you." As I moved around the kitchen, I watched her from the corner of my eye. She sat with the flowers clutched in her lap, staring down at them like they might explain something she couldn't say aloud. When I handed her the tea, she whispered, "He told me you were his sister, that you were sick. That's why he couldn't see me sometimes." The words hit me like a cold slap. I blinked, forcing myself not to react. "His sister?" She nodded, looking ashamed. "He said he was taking care of you because you had... I don't know. Something chronic. That you were divorced, and he just wanted to help." My hands tightened around my own cup. Nathan's lies had always been creative, but this was a masterpiece of cruelty. I sat down across from her, meeting her eyes. "I'm not his sister. I'm his wife. 17 years. She went pale. "Oh my God." I reached for the photo frame on the side table and turned it toward her. It was our wedding photo. Nathan in his tuxedo, smiling wide, his hand over mine as if to promise the world. Amber stared at it, her face crumbling. He told me you were gone." "Gone?" She nodded. "He said you'd left him, that you couldn't handle his job, that you'd taken the house, and he was just staying here temporarily until he found his own place." I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "So he lied to both of us." Amber's eyes glistened. "I didn't mean to. I swear, if I'd known." "I believe you," I said softly. Her head snapped up, startled. "You do?" "Yes." I took a slow breath. "Because you're too young to lie that well, and because I've seen that look before, the look of someone realizing the person they love isn't who they thought." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I thought he was going to leave her. You. For me. He said you were cold, that you didn't care anymore. I looked down at my cup, watching the steam rise. That's what they all say when they want to feel like the hero of their own betrayal. Amber let out a broken laugh, more a sob than sound. I thought I was special. You were, I said. Special enough to help him lie better. She flinched at that, then nodded. I deserve that. The room fell silent for a moment, filled only by the faint ticking of the clock above the fireplace. Finally, I stood and walked to the drawer where I kept the old receipts and proof of his deception. I pulled out a few sheets, dinner bills, hotel stays, small gifts, and placed them on the coffee table. These are from the past few months, I said. You'll see your name, or your initials, or your favorite restaurants. It's all there. Her fingers hovered over the papers, but didn't touch them. You kept everything. I had to, I said quietly, for the truth. She nodded slowly, tears rolling down her cheeks now. I'm so sorry, Holly. I didn't know. And for the first time, I believed her completely. In that moment, the anger I'd been nursing began to shift. Not vanish, but change shape. It wasn't directed at her anymore. She was a symptom, not the disease. I reached across the table and placed my hand lightly on hers. You're not my enemy, Amber. He is. Her shoulders shook as she cried, the flowers slipping from her lap onto the carpet. Pink petals scattered across the floor like tiny confessions. When she could finally speak, her voice was small and cracked. What are you going to do? I looked at her, my tone calm, steady. I'm going to end it. Properly, but not like him. Not with lies. She nodded, sniffling, then stood. I'll tell him it's over, I swear. I smiled faintly. I don't care what you tell him. Just tell yourself the truth from now on. Amber hesitated, then whispered, Thank you for not yelling at me. I met her eyes. Yelling is easy. Understanding takes more strength. She gave a watery smile and turned toward the door, leaving the flowers behind. As she stepped out into the morning light, I felt something inside me unclench. A tension I hadn't even realized I was holding. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of silence. This one felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman reclaiming her own story. When I looked down at the fallen petals, I didn't see loss. I saw closure beginning to take root. That night, I packed a suitcase, not in secret this time, but with intention. My clothes, my important documents, Maya's essentials. Every zipper that closed felt like a door sealing shut behind me. When I was done, I left the suitcase by the front door. It stood upright, waiting, a quiet declaration that I was done being part of his illusion. Hours later, I heard the familiar sound of Nathan's car pulling into the driveway. The headlights swept across the wall, illuminating the packed bag for just a moment before fading. The door opened. Footsteps, the scent of his cologne. Holly? He called softly. I turned to face him, my expression calm. He saw the suitcase first. His smile faltered. What's going on? I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to feel that silence, heavy, final, powerful. His voice cracked as he whispered, You're leaving me? And I replied, No, Nathan. I already left. You're just finally seeing it. Walking out felt like walking through smoke, choking, blinding, but necessary to breathe again. Walking out felt like walking through smoke, choking, blinding, but necessary to breathe again. Nathan stood in the living room, his face pale, his voice trembling. The man who'd once looked invincible, now looking so small. The suitcase by the door was already zipped, ready. I had packed Maya's things neatly, labeling every box. Order among the chaos. Holly, please, he said, his voice cracking as he took a step closer. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. Start over. I'll end it with her. I already did. She means nothing to me. His words hit me like echoes from the past. I'd heard versions of them before. Promises meant to stall, apologies meant to pacify. But now they were just noise. I stood still, hands folded calmly in front of me. Nathan, I'm not angry anymore, I said quietly. I'm done. He blinked rapidly, confusion flooding his face. Done? You're just leaving? I nodded. Maya and I are going to stay with Celine for a while. His mouth fell open. Celine? That's Holly, come on, be reasonable. You can't just take Maya and... Don't, I interrupted, my tone steady but firm. Don't turn this into control. I'm not taking her from you. I'm taking her away from this. He froze, chest heaving. I can change, he whispered. I'll prove it. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. His disheveled hair, the tears welling in his eyes, the way his voice trembled as he reached for me. But there was no power left in his hands. He couldn't touch me anymore, not in the way that mattered. Every time I forgave you for something smaller, I said softly. I was teaching you how to break me a little more. I can't keep teaching that lesson. He flinched. You're making a mistake. I smiled faintly. Maybe. But at least it'll be my mistake this time. The weight in the air thickened. Maya's footsteps echoed down the stairs. She appeared with her backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression steady, older somehow than her 16 years. You ready, Mom? She asked. I turned to her, expecting anger, confusion, but instead I saw something else. Pride. She walked over, took my hand, and squeezed it gently. I'm proud of you, Mom, she said softly. You should have left a long time ago. My throat tightened. I wanted to cry, but not from pain, from the sudden realization that she'd seen everything I'd tried so hard to hide. Nathan's eyes darted between us. Maya, please, he pleaded. I messed up, but you know I love you. I know, she said quietly. But love doesn't excuse everything. She turned toward the door, and that was the moment I knew there was no turning back. I took one last look around the house, the place that had witnessed every version of me, the hopeful bride, the exhausted mother, the invisible wife. The walls were still the same soft beige I'd painted years ago, but they no longer felt like home. They felt like a museum of things I'd outgrown. I left the flowers Amber had brought sitting on the counter. I didn't need to take ghosts with me. As we stepped outside, the air felt colder but cleaner. The sun was barely up, casting long shadows across the lawn I'd once tended so carefully. The car engine hummed quietly as I pulled out of the driveway. Nathan stood on the porch, watching us go, his figure shrinking in the rearview mirror until he was just a blur. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. Celine welcomed us with open arms. Her house was smaller but warmer, full of mismatched furniture and laughter that didn't sound rehearsed. She hugged me tight and whispered, You did it. You finally did it. Over the next few weeks, the ache in my chest began to soften. I started therapy, something I'd always told myself I didn't need. My therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Reeves, listened more than she spoke. She didn't tell me how to heal. She helped me remember that I already knew how. Maya adjusted quickly. She found comfort in Celine's teenage son, who treated her like a little sister. I could see the relief in her eyes, the peace that comes when the fighting finally stops. I started working part-time at a local interior design firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I'd forgotten how much I loved color, texture, light, how much joy came from creating beauty where there had been emptiness. Every morning, I woke up early, brewed my own coffee, and sat by the window, just breathing. For years, my mornings had been filled with rushing and serving and waiting. Now they belonged to me. Some evenings, Celine and I would sit on her porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. We didn't always talk about Nathan, but when we did, it was with the calm detachment you use when recalling a story that's already ended. Then, one Friday afternoon, karma decided to do what it does best, arrive fashionably late, but perfectly timed. I was scrolling through social media when I saw it, a post from Amber. It was public, visible to anyone. A long paragraph that began with, "To the woman who trusted him, I'm sorry. To the man who lied to us both, this is what you deserve." Attached were screenshots, text messages, photos, timestamps, all of it. Amber had exposed everything. Nathan's double life, his manipulation, his cruelty. But the part that made me pause was near the end, where she wrote, "He told me his wife was sick. Turns out she was the strongest one of us all." Within hours, the post spread. Nathan's name was dragged through local gossip, his colleagues whispering behind closed doors. By Monday morning, he was suspended from his company pending internal investigation. I didn't need to guess what that meant. The evidence of embezzlement would eventually surface. I'd already made sure of that. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just exhaled. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it arrives as silence, the absence of fear. Weeks passed. Life took on a rhythm again. Maya and I found a small apartment nearby. I filled it with secondhand furniture and soft yellow curtains that made every morning glow. There were still moments when grief brushed against me, the ghost of what I'd hoped my life would be. But those moments didn't stay long. I was learning how to live again, how to laugh without permission, how to look at my reflection and see someone whole. Then one morning, as I sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee, I noticed a small envelope by my cup. Maya must have brought in the mail before leaving for school. It was addressed to me in Nathan's handwriting. No return address, just my name. I stared at it for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my fingers. I didn't open it. Not yet. Some truths I'd learned don't need to be read right away. The sunlight shifted across the table, catching the edge of the sealed envelope. I whispered to myself, whatever's in there, it won't change who I am now, and left it unopened, for the moment. I didn't need to read his apology to know it wasn't for me. It was for his conscience. I didn't need to read his apology to know it wasn't for me. It was for his conscience. The letter sat on my desk for weeks, tucked between unpaid bills and half-finished sketches from my new design job. Every time I saw Nathan's handwriting, my heart would tighten for a moment, then loosen again. I wasn't afraid of his words. I was just done carrying them. But one quiet evening, with the rain tapping gently against the window and the world outside feeling small and safe, I decided it was time. I made myself a cup of tea, sat down at the table, and slit the envelope open with the edge of a butter knife. The paper smelled faintly of his cologne, the one that used to make me ache and now only reminded me of dust. The letter began simply. Holly, I don't expect you to read this, but if you do, I need to say I'm sorry for everything. He went on for pages, about the lies, the selfishness, the fear. He wrote about the affair, the deceit at work, how everything had spiraled because he didn't know how to stop pretending. He admitted that Amber had left him shortly after everything came out, that the company was investigating him, that his reputation, his savings, his comfort, all gone. He didn't ask me to come back. Not once. You were right, he wrote. You always were. You didn't deserve any of it. I lost you long before you left the house, and I see now that's my fault, not yours. I read every word carefully, feeling surprisingly calm. No tears, no anger, just the quiet recognition of a man finally meeting the truth I'd lived with for years. When I reached the end, he wrote, I hope one day you'll forgive me. Not so we can start over, but so you can let go. I folded the letter neatly, pressed it flat against the table, and whispered to the empty room, I already did. Because I had. The forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me, for the woman who'd been small, afraid, and silenced by the idea that her worth was tied to someone else's love. I took out a single sheet of paper and wrote my reply. Nathan, I forgive you. Not for you. For me, Holly. That was it. No bitterness, no sentiment, just truth. I slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and placed it beside his letter. Then, without thinking too hard, I reached for my blue leather journal, the one I'd labeled A Record of Truth. It had started as evidence, then it became therapy. Now it was a relic. I carried it outside to the small patio of my apartment where the evening breeze smelled faintly of rain and jasmine. I placed the journal in the fire pit, struck a match, and watched as the flame caught. The pages curled, darkened, and then glowed orange. Words I had written in pain turned to ash in seconds, and with each flicker, I felt lighter. When the fire went out, only a thin trail of smoke remained, twisting upward into the night sky. I whispered softly, "Goodbye," and meant it. In the weeks that followed, peace didn't arrive all at once. It came slowly, like dawn creeping through curtains. Some mornings, I still woke up expecting to hear Nathan's footsteps. Other times, I'd reach for a memory only to realize it no longer hurt. Maya was thriving. She joined the debate club at school, started volunteering at a local animal shelter, and laughed more easily now. There was a brightness in her that had been missing before, a spark I recognized as freedom. One night, she came into my room, holding her phone. "Mom," she said, "look at this." It was a text from Nathan, just 3 words. "I'm proud, kid." She smiled sadly. I didn't reply. I don't hate him, but I think I get you now. I brushed her hair from her face and kissed her forehead. "That's all I ever wanted, sweetheart. For you to understand that leaving wasn't giving up. It was choosing better." She hugged me tightly, and in that embrace, I felt something close to grace. Months slipped by. Seasons changed. The air turned crisp and new, and I found comfort in small things. Morning coffee, freshly folded laundry, the hum of city life outside my window. I threw myself into work, helping clients redesign their homes. Spaces full of light, warmth, and second chances. It felt poetic somehow, helping others rebuild while quietly rebuilding myself. Dr. Reeves encouraged me to attend a local support group for women healing from betrayal. At first, I only listened, sitting in the back with folded hands. But one evening, when a young woman broke down saying she didn't know how to start over, I found myself speaking. "I thought I didn't either," I said. But then I realized starting over doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means refusing to let it define you. After the session, several women approached me, thanking me for my words. The facilitator asked if I'd consider mentoring newcomers, and so I did. Week after week, I sat with women at the beginning of their own heartbreaks, helping them find the strength I once thought I'd lost forever. In helping them, I healed myself. One evening, after a long day at the firm, I came home to a quiet apartment. The sunlight was soft, spilling golden across the wooden floor. I turned on some music, something gentle, and began folding laundry, my own shirts this time. Each piece of fabric smelled faintly of lavender, warm and clean from the dryer. My hands moved without thought, steady and calm. Folding had once felt like servitude. Now it felt like closure, an act of care, not duty. I caught my reflection in the window. My hair was a little shorter now, my face a little older, but my eyes looked alive again. I smiled. Not the forced smile of a woman trying to keep a marriage afloat, but the real kind, the one that comes when you finally know who you are without anyone else's approval. I thought about everything I'd endured, the lies, the betrayal, the silence. And for the first time, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt gratitude, because every fracture had led me here, to a life that was mine and mine alone. If I were telling my story aloud, this is where my voice would soften, where I'd let the final words linger long enough for them to mean something. Sometimes I'd say, silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of strength gathering. I placed the last shirt neatly in the drawer, turned off the light, and stood by the window as the city hummed quietly below. The world felt vast again, not frightening, but open. And as I watched the sunset fade into twilight, I whispered one final truth. To myself, to the woman I used to be, to the one I'd finally become. And that's how I found peace, by choosing myself. I never needed to destroy him. Watching him live with his own truth was enough. For years my silence kept me small, but in the end it became my strength. I learned that revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's simply walking away without looking back. And as I folded my own shirts in my new home, I finally understood, because choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. If Holly's story reminded you that silence can be powerful, show her strength some love, hit like, share her story, and subscribe for more real voices like hers. Because sometimes, walking away isn't weak, it's wisdom. Tell me in the comments, if you were in Holly's place, would you have stayed quiet or made him face the world?